Dr. Vanessa Riley. Let me get it right. Author of historical romance novel Island Queen, but just author extraordinaire. I mean, just outstanding. Um, we are here to speak with her for blackbookstore.com. So very excited to have you. I saw you were on back in February, so it's glad to have you back on with another masterpiece.
Thank you. Thank you.
Outstanding, just outstanding. So we're here to discuss her latest novel, which is due out July 6th. Right. I love how you planned that right around Independence Day.
I have to thank William Morrow for that.
Okay. Well, shout out to William Morrow.
Very supportive and
great choice.
I love it. I love it.
Great choice. But so I'll just read a little bit your bio here. You have a doctorate in mechanical engineering. So your background is engineering, but you seem to be your penchant seems to be for the historic fiction genre.
Yes.
Okay. And you've written about like 20 books?
About 20 books.
Wow, awesome.
I lost count somewhere in there. So it's like 20.
Is there a hidden manuscript that's maybe?
Oh, there's always a hidden manuscript.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So welcome. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. This is an outstanding narrative. I really love, you said it's a story of resilience, heart, and fever. And for me, I said it's about dominating your dreams too. For me, because Dorothy, so let's just give a synopsis of the book. Island Queen focuses on Dorothy Kerwin Thomas. She was born into slavery in Montserrat. Am I pronouncing that? The Caribbean, Montserrat, the island of Montserrat. She was born into slavery and was able to buy her own freedom and the freedom of her family, her children, her sister, her mother. She was able to, and she became one of the wealthiest landowners in the Caribbean area. But while she was doing that, she was fighting so much. So people can have context. This was during slavery time. So it's hard for a woman to be a business owner now, but for her to have achieved so much. So for you, in a snapshot, Vanessa, what does this story represent?
This story represents over 6 years of research. This is a story that, in my mind, I understand why history wanted to erase her. But at the same time, I cannot believe that history would erase this woman who did so much under so much duress. I mean, like you said, Rocky, this is a time where enslavement of a Black person is a common thing. The priests owned slaves. Okay. So if you think about that,
it's a way of life.
It's a way of life. It was in context, this was a way of life. And if you're a Black woman and you are able to gain your freedom, your choices of how to make money are very limited still. So for Dorothy to overcome this and to become one of the wealthiest women in the West Indies, she brought her seat to the table. She made a seat and put a seat at the table. And unlike her peers, she's always worried about losing that seat. So the motivation of being free, but yet still not free, is a thing, because a Black person could be re-enslaved. If a white person during that time frame fell into debt, they could go to debtor's prison, but enslavement was not a thing necessarily for them. They may become an indentured servant, but for a Black person, that is a thing. And so that's a reality. So you've got to do everything you possibly can do to stay out of debt, to make your own way. And Dorothy was just so resilient. I'm blessed that I was able to find her. I'm honored to be able to tell her story.
I love it. I love it. And so finding her, by the way, is it when you read Jane Austen's Sanditon? Is that when you found out about Dorothy?
That started my hunt for a Dorothy.
Okay.
So, Jane Austen, everybody knows her from Pride and Prejudice and maybe Emma and all the movies we talk about and everything. But in her very last book, Sanditon, the wealthiest woman in the book, is a woman, a mulatto woman from the West Indies. And I'm like, why is Jane writing this? Now, is Jane just super liberal back in, 1810? Or is she telling the story of what she's seeing? So I was like, let's see if there is that type of character, that type of woman. And so as I was doing research, I found more and more of the plantation owners in the West Indies, when they would have mixed race children, particularly daughters, they would send them to Scotland, Ireland, and England for education, because everybody knows education is the key to keeping mobility and those types of things. And wealthy fathers would make sure they want those girls married, so they had dowries and things like that. So second sons and peers, who were light in the pockets, definitely looked that way. And intermarriage was a common thing, much more common than anywhere else because of this mobility and because of this wealth that's coming from the West Indies. So I was searching and searching, and literally came upon looking for something else, because that's how it is. I tell all writers, when you find something good, you make sure you take a snapshot. You will never find it again. Found a cartoon of Prince William Henry, aka future King William IV, is lying in a hammock with a Black woman.
Right, I see the picture you have it in here.
Yes.
I like how you put the picture in here to be like, look, now I'm not just pulling it just out of thin air.
Exactly. And during this time frame, especially Gilroy, the cartoonist, he's an ist. He's a prejudice. He is misogynist. He's sexist. He's just every ist you can come up with. So typically, when he draws Black women, he draws them very garish, big lips, exaggerated features, because we're part of the joke. Mm-hmm. But when you look at this drawing, this Black woman is drawn beautifully. Mm-hmm. So she's not part of the joke. She's a tattle. He is trying to tell everybody what Prince William Henry is doing in the West Indies. Mm-hmm. And so, as I say, follow the rich man. By tracing Prince William's life, especially in the West Indies, I come to the island of Dominica, and all his buddies are talking about this mulatto woman that the prince is head over heels over. They talk about him dancing up in the mulatto balls with this particular woman, Dorothy, and that's the first time I find the name Dorothy Kerwin. And
I love it.
Just researching, and I get these pieces of her life, and I'm like, I have to tell this story.
Right. So that is astounding, because it's a very authentic narrative, and I love how it shows that we played an integral part of history. So just like Bridgerton, we were there. We were there, not as much as we should have been in certain areas, but we did exist. We did have roles of prominence. And I was really struck by the dichotomies that Dorothy had to deal with. She's a Black woman. Yes. She's a slave. Yes. She's mulatto. Yes. She's a mother. She's a daughter. She's also a concubine. She's also, at sometimes she acquiesces, other times she's rebelling, and how she's taught herself to pretty much, at one point she said, I just lie to myself. She learned from her mom to just keep it moving and just keep that straight face. So describe some of the emotions that you went through as a Black woman when we're telling these stories, knowing that it empowers us in some way, but also really thinking about the sacrifices and some of the anguish that she had to deal with, and still just keep her head up high. So what was that like for you as you were writing this and you were learning some of those details?
At times heart-wrenching. And at times there is a pride of how she overcame, how she persevered. A lot of people, when they think of Blacks in history, they only think of enslavement. They only think of horrors. They only think of something where, the white savior has to come in and do right by these Black folk and all this.
Right, save them. They need us. They weren't doing good till we got here.
Yes.
They know no better.
Yes. And so you find this woman who defies all the odds. And this is just the one that we know, because when the way history is, the rich man, his words are recorded. He's got diaries. His friends have diaries, et cetera, et cetera. For women, and particularly women of color, Black women, not so much. And so you've got to find pieces like Dorothy her will is actually archived in the UK because that's how prominent she became. You find deeds and things like that because she made sure her legal paperwork was
right. She stressed. She was from Montserrat to Demaria.
Yeah.
To London, like she was, and I forgot another place that she was.
Grenada, Barbados. She was very mobile, and everywhere she went, she set up businesses, and she just kept moving. And so we are, especially during this whole pandemic, we've been sitting on our chairs a little bit much, right? So that whole thing of just keeping it moving, it's inspiring. And once again, I understand why history tried to erase her, because once you realize that you come from stock that can persevere through all kind of situations and find a way through, that is so empowering. But at the same time, this woman lived through some rebellions and all kind of manner of crazy, and you have the nerve to leave her out of the books. I don't get it.
And you know what's something that I was and that's why it's good that there are people like us who will tell our stories. I love, as a writer myself, I talk about shifting narratives, telling new perspectives. I love discovering the stories that other people aren't telling. I love discovering and telling those stories that other people aren't telling. And I love the detail with which you were talking about her clothing and her finery and what she was wearing. Talk about that, because I heard you're a little seamstress as well. So talk about how you incorporated some of those elements, like the extent, like how did you know what she would be wearing? Like how did with your research, I'm trying to understand, like how did you gain an accurate picture of what she was wearing and what those details were?
There are always art of the time period. So you look at the paintings of that day, and there are lots of paintings where Black women are servants, Black women are enslaved, Black women are free. And you can just see the progression and the styles of clothing. One of the big discoveries for me was the hats. If a woman was free, she could wear a hat. Oh. If she wasn't free, she had her hair tied in a scarf. It really made me think about wearing scarves now.
You know what? Right. And the bonnets too, but we're not going to go there. So I think, does that lend to the tradition of all us putting on our Sunday best? Right?
Yes.
I remember my grandma had these hat boxes.
Yes.
And you better not touch those hat boxes. They stayed up on her shelf, and you better not touch those hat boxes. So this, I love to try traditions.
We get that rich tradition. We all casual now when we go to church, but our mothers, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, they wore those hats. And that to me is an homage of, look, I'm free. I'm free to worship. I'm free to go where I need to go and do what I need to do. And it's all back to these women.
I love it. Because I've told my kids, like, moms, women, we are the birth givers and the multipliers in multiple forms. So I really love that. And I love when I discovered that Lady Danbury from Bridgerton was doing the ebook. I literally screamed. I was like, oh my God, Lady Danbury. Now pronounce the actress's name for me, because I don't want to butcher it.
Adjoa Endo.
I love it. I love it. When I saw her on Instagram reading it, I was like, oh my gosh. And it sounds like, you know what? I could imagine her playing in a movie or TV adaptation of this. Like when as I was reading through this, I was like, I could totally see this being a movie or a series. And then when I saw Lady Danbury from Bridgerton reading the ebook, I was like, she would be perfect as her. She would be perfect as Dorothy. So is that something you've thought about? Like, would you be open to it being adapted into a film or to a TV show?
You probably need to ask me in a few more weeks, because some things may have happened behind the scene that I am not at liberty to say.
Is it? You know what? See, I did, because this book just gives you that vibes. And also the piece that I was reading, the lady, it was an article, a review she just did. It's called Den Geek.
Yes,
Amanda. And she said the same thing at the end of her article. She was like, I could see this being, I was like, oh my God, I thought the same thing. So take me through how you incorporate your heritage, because your great great grandmother was Trinidadian and you have Irish.
My grandmother, my father's Trinidadian.
Okay.
My father's Trinidad, but I was family lore is always special, right? And so a couple years ago, we learned that my great great grandmother immigrated to Trinidad from India. And I was like, what? Why?
So she was East Indian.
Yes.
I love it.
Okay. I was like, why isn't some of this stuff written down, guys? Y'all make me have to go do all these DNA tests and all this stuff.
Right. You might be related to Kamala somehow. I
mean, and then once again, on my mom's side, we're from people from South Carolina. Riley is our master's name, and as it's handed down from that side. So that's where we get the Irish bits from, is from my mom's side. So I'm a true mingling mutt kind of girl.
I love how you incorporated the Irish vernacular. And I was really intrigued when I was doing some research that
the Gaelic, right?
Gaelic. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Gaelic. I was really intrigued by when I found out that more slaves went to the Caribbean than America.
Yes.
A lot of people don't know, like only a small percentage of the actual slaves that came from Africa were in America. Most of them were in the Caribbean and South Americas.
Yes. See, most people, we think cotton and we think United States and picking cotton, all that sort of stuff. But they forget that the world was fueled on sugar. In Europe, for every $4 of sugar money, $1 of internal consumption. So basically 80%, 75 to 80% of their money is coming from the wealth of the Caribbean, because people are buying sugar, people are trading sugar, all these sorts of things. And then don't even mention indigo, which was that dye, or even coffee. All of this is coming from the West Indies. And the climate is very harsh, and so our average in the West Indies, our average lifespan is between 30 35 years. And if you're out here, you could potentially get all of these diseases, because at first they weren't clothing the slaves properly, and they were the harsh weather and whatnot. So the importation is ridiculous, the number of enslaved people that they are bringing to all of the islands, because all the islands had either and or sugar, coffee, or indigo, and those were huge staples of the colonial economy.
Now, I love learning about parts of history like that, because I have to admit, Americans, we are self-centered at times. We really think, and it reminds me of the author, she's Nigerian, and I'm probably going to butcher her name, but Chimamanda Adichie. I'm probably butchering her name. Forgive me. She's wrote Purple Hibiscus and American Sun, I believe. She's run a few books. And she said we have to be careful of the single story, of how the story is just coming from one perspective.
Absolutely. And, a lot of people.
And so I love how you're someone who bring those things to light. So let's delve a little bit more into how you develop some of these pivotal moments for Dorothy, because I noticed there were some pivotal moments for her where it was like, there's no turning back, like there's that shift. She's choosing a junction. Yes. And one of those was when she went out into the hallway, Sales' hallway, and she saw the lone painting of the woman. I guess it was his female ancestor amongst all these other men. And she said, in that moment, I decided what I wanted, that I was not, and it took her it was some ebb and flow there, because she did some things that you would look at her sideways about, but not understanding that if you're a sex worker, that's probably because you are forced into that position. You don't have a lot of choices. So talk about how you crafted those pivotal moments where you knew, like, this needs to be a moment that I illustrate to the reader that she's taking a junction.
It's, some people say that the characters talk to them. And so there are moments I'm writing this story and I could hear her voice. I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, really? This is what you're going to do? But the overarching
and wake you up in the middle of the night.
Wake you up, right? Wake you up in the middle of the night. It was like, let me get my dictation. And I tried the notepad. It never works. I can never read whatever I wrote in the middle of the night.
Right.
People use your phones. There's a purpose.
Right.
But there are moments where I needed to make sure everybody saw the growth in Dorothy, of her taking more control of her life, because to me, you can't become the Dorothy that's founding schools and building luxury hotels if you are completely driven by the circumstances that are happening, or you're following men, or et cetera. There are moments where she has to take control. And so throughout the narrative, there are junctures to me that just spoke to me that said, this is a moment. And I sit in those moments because, you know, she went through so much. And the thing is, to me, you don't forget when you've gone through these traumatic things,
Yep.
no matter how you look all cleaned up and nice on the outside, you are still sometimes reliving that. And the things that she suffered in order to be where she is and to protect her family, I know it was in her soul. And I know that's because, to me, it justifies, well, not justifies, but explains to me why she made certain decisions.
Right.
Because of that fear of always being back under somebody's thumb, being enslaved again. I've got to do whatever it takes to survive and to make sure my family survives.
Right.
So,
yep.
I wanted you guys to sit in her skin, so that even if she makes decisions that you don't agree with, in our 21st century mindset, I want you to understand why she did what she did.
Right. And I do know, because she's facing some of the same stuff we face: racism, marginalism, sexism, classism. We're facing some of that same stuff today. So I did identify at times like, wow, she made a lot of sacrifices, and how even when you on the outside appear and you're in certain spaces, still on the inside, what's happening in your soul is what is affecting you. Because that reminds me of a part in the book where she said she had on her finery, but her soul still had on the slave cloth, her heart, so to speak. So let's talk about these men, though, in the book. The three guys who were pivotal to her: Joseph Thomas, John Roosevelt Sells, and King William IV. So right quick, just give us whom are they to Dorothy? How do they play a part?
Sells is, somebody said he's like Mr. Big, right?
Yeah, okay. I can go with that. I'll rock with that.
That recurring guy, kind of good, kind of bad. You just don't exactly know where he's sitting. Selfish in some regards. But when you need him, he's there.
Okay.
In some form or fashion. So that Sells. Thomas was the guy that I think found her at that moment where she's trying to recover who she is, trying to reestablish her connection to her goals. And he's that support mechanism in my mind. Okay. But once again, he's still a man of that time frame. So he's going to have his moments.
Right.
And then there is the Playboy, right?
The one she was in a hammock with.
Gotta have one.
Is that the one she was in a hammock with, King?
Yes. That's it. That's it. Because I not to spoil it to the readers, but there's a moment where Dorothy has the money all on her own to get to London if she wants to go, but she takes up a little prince's invitation.
YOLO, you only live once. I think Dorothy was owed it too. She had a hard life.
Yes.
You only live once. And I think it's okay when women, they assert their sexuality. It's we're carnal beings too. Mm-hmm. No one blinks an eye when men do it.
I know. And he was a little younger too.
Right. So, you can train the young ones, right? We know they got that stamina. Like, come on. I mean, especially mature women, we understand that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I appreciate you. We're coming to a close, and I really enjoyed you, Vanessa, and I look forward to the book. You all make sure it'll be on blackbookstore.com, rolling out books. Get this seriously. And when I know when it becomes on screen. Please reach back out to us, Vanessa. I would really love to be involved in that, because I totally see this. So let's leave the readers with, what will the readers, when they are done, when they get to that last page of the book, what will they leave with?
They're going to leave with another impression of what it was like for women during that time frame. You're going to leave with a feeling of resilience and power that I think we are often kept from. It's often hidden from us. Right. There are, enslavement is part of her story, but you're going to see someone who powered through, who survived and thrived and tried to take control of her narrative as much as possible. So you're going to be left with a different impression of the world. You will definitely see that we were there, because, we still have some deniers of that fact. And to see a woman to go from enslavement to one of the wealthiest women in the West Indies, someone that influential in politics. There's just so many different things she's done. You need to, just for your own ancestors, just grab this book and look at it and know you come from great stock.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, we come from kings and queens, but also you come from landowners and wealthy elite as well. For me, it was just epically liberating to read this book.
I like that. Epically
like liberating. That just epically liberating. Like I was like, oh, we can do anything after you see what she's endured.
And that's key, because people often assume you've got to be given everything, or because my parents didn't do X, or this is a woman who took control of her narrative. So Absolutely. She can do it under all these circumstances. We can do it.
What's your excuse, right? Right. Well, thank you so much, Vanessa. And I know we're both teen moms, so I'm sure you've given your kid the same speech. Like, you're lucky, you're privileged, you're living a great life compared to what can be. So thank you again, Dr. Vanessa Riley. Island Queen is out July 6th. Where can people find it? Well, of course, they can go to blackbookstore.com and make sure, where can they follow you?
They can follow me at vanessariley.com. All my social media is there. I'm big time on Instagram, on Twitter, sort of on Facebook, sort of. So, but if you pre-order this book, make sure you go to my bio and Linktree, because you can get a free print of this cover before 11:59 Eastern Standard Time on July 5th. So time is running out.
All right. I love it. I love you. Thank you. Thank you again, Dr. Vanessa Riley. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.